Broadcasting from the world headquarters of the National Floor Safety Institute is America's slip and fall guy, Russ.
Good afternoon, Wendy. First of all, I'm with Wendy Stephenson, Vice President of Risk Management at the Risk Authority here in Columbia, South Carolina. Is this your headquarters?
This is the East Coast headquarters of the Risk Authority, yes.
So you have other offices?
The Risk Authority is affiliated with Stanford Healthcare, and they're in Palo Alto.
Okay, in Palo Alto. Gotcha. So, of course, I was here today for a presentation on slip, trip, and fall prevention. Had a pretty good turnout, 40 people or so.
Yep, that's correct.
So tell us a little bit about who you are, who is the Risk Authority, and as Vice President of Risk Management for the Risk Authority, kind of what your responsibilities are.
Sure. Well, over here on the East Coast, the Risk Authority, we manage workers' compensation trusts, self-insured trusts, and we manage professional liability, general liability captive for non-for-profit healthcare entities within the state of South Carolina. So I work mainly with the members of the Workers' Compensation Trust. We deal with slips, trips, and falls extensively because that is actually right now our leading cause of injury. First and foremost for all of our healthcare members. It used to be patient handling injuries, probably about 6-7 years ago. But unfortunately, we have been able to implement risk reduction objectives for patient handling, but now slips, trips, and falls has become the number one leading cause of injury.
Why is that?
Well, there are a lot of different reasons for that. Healthcare, in and of itself, many of the slips, trips, falls are related to water, wet surfaces. Many are related to ice and frozen. Believe it or not, here in South Carolina, we don't get a lot of ice and snow. So when we do, it's not as easy to handle. We don't have snow blowers, and they don't know how to properly clear for ice. So that's one of the things we struggle with. The last 2 out of the last 4 years, we've had significant ice storms that have made it all the way down to the southernmost part of South Carolina. And so not only are our members affected, meaning the employees, but of course patients, visitors, anyone else coming in, they're affected by the ice as well.
So if you were to break down a percentage of injuries that are related to internal, meaning inside of the building,
right,
versus external,
right,
how would that break down?
As far as frequency, internal related to wet surfaces would be, for most of our members, in the top 2 to 3 reasons. External ice, those are severe, but not as frequent. But when we look at what's happening outside, we do see the trip falls, curbs, uneven surfaces, items in the way, parking lots that are have some defects that need to be fixed. So those are the types of things we see outside versus inside.
Are they guests? Are they employees?
Well, because I work mainly with the Workers' Compensation Trust, I'm looking at and reviewing the information on employees. We have Amy Uldrich, who you met today as well. She works with the professional liability and general liability, so she's the one who sees most of those types of claims.
So it's a worker showing up at the workplace, gets out of their vehicle, and between the vehicle and the entrance, that's where they're having their slips and falls due to inclement weather, snow, ice, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's inclement weather, but a lot of our hospital campuses, they're large, so a lot of them are going building to building, outside for meetings, for other things. It's not just a single building campus. Right. There are other, it's not just coming in and out of work, even though that's...
You get a lot of hurricanes here too, Wendy.
We do. We get a lot of water.
Yeah, a lot of water outside, and it migrates inside of the building.
That's true.
And we spoke today during my presentation about entranceway floor mats, that sort of thing. Kind of tell us a little bit about the prevention strategies that you employ, that your members employ to help kind of prevent these types of injuries, I guess both indoors and outdoors?
Right. Well, the first thing we do is we recognize the need for walking around and just investigating on a regular basis what do your floor surfaces look like right now. Floor surfaces change, meaning stuff gets spilled, things get in the way. You need to have a consistent strategy of looking at those high-risk areas that are in constant change to make sure they're safe. So your lobbies, your employee entrances, your high-access areas need to be looked at, need to be updated to make sure they're safe. So laying down mats, taking up mats when appropriate, having your housekeeping EVS staff come by and on a more regular basis, depending on the type of day. Right now is pollen season in South Carolina, so it's not always wet. It is also grit. So sometimes they do need to just dry mop the entranceways on a more regular basis to get that grit up and off the floor. So there is some of that as well.
Is there something unique about your members and the nature of their business that may be more prone for their employees or their guests to slip and fall?
I would say especially for their guests, yes. I mean, healthcare, a lot of people who are coming into your environment are coming in because they are in need of some sort of medical attention.
Are these all hospitals?
They're all healthcare related. So
Okay.
the hospitals, clinics, physician practices, healthcare related.
Mostly elderly people, obviously a lot of injured people that are in need of health care, but do you find that disproportionately many of the injured parties or the guests, for example, are older?
Well, I think, as you know, the American population is older. So, yes, many of the guests, the community members, the visitors, the patients even coming in, you do have a high proportion of them being on the older side of the spectrum, 60 or older. So, yes, they're coming in. But you also have people who have, especially if you're, say, an orthopedic physician's clinic, then yes, a lot of your patients and a lot of your visitors may have issues with altered gait. Right. So you've got to make sure you're aware of the type of people that are going to normally be coming into your environment.
Right. And medication. A lot of people are coming in on medication, which may limit their mobility or cause them to be, have whatever side effects of the medication are on. And so safeguarding becomes that much more important. Do you find that most of the claims are from elderly people or younger people, men, women? I mean, what's kind of the mix?
Well, when I look at our employee-related claims, we do see that our employees are staying employed longer. And especially for slips, trips, and falls, the more severe claims, the more severe workers' comp claims are related to those that are older, or they have additional comorbidities, diabetes, high blood pressure. Some of them have a potential previous injuries related to knees, backs, so their gait was already altered. They're still employed, so it wasn't altered significantly that they were not employed, but that's kind of what we look at from a severity aspect.
Nothing like getting hurt on your way to the hospital.
Right.
Or in the hospital.
Right, while you're there.
For that matter. Of course, it's very convenient. There's immediate care.
Right.
Once you get hurt. As far as workers go, is there a certain type of workers? Is it primarily nursing staff? Or who do you find the most, has the higher rate of exposure for slip and fall, as far as workers go?
And that's intriguing. Some people would assume that the workers who are more frequently around water sources and high moving environments like the workers in the kitchen or the workers in housekeeping would be most affected. But for our members, that's not quite the case. Most of our members have implemented additional strategies for those high risk areas to include slip resistant shoes, additional training and awareness level training to try to combat the high risk that they face. So really, when we see the severe injuries, they are our caregivers. They're the nurse techs, the CNAs, RNs. Those are the ones that unfortunately we see having and experiencing these slip, trips, falls.
Now, one of the things that we talked about in today's presentation is auditing, inspections of walkways, testing of walkways. You're a walkway auditor.
I am, yeah.
You actually took the walkway auditing course a few years ago?
Yes.
And enjoyed it?
I did.
Learned anything?
I learned a lot, really.
In fact, you actually go out and do some testing from time to time.
I do.
How important do you think that's going to be to your members? Maybe, talk a little bit about how...
Sure.
How having that firsthand kind of real life information about the slip resistance of their floor, how that's going to play out.
I think that's very important. As a hospital goes, a lot of times you have hospitals that, they start off as a smaller hospital back in the 70s, 60s, 50s, some even in the 40s, and you build on and you add on, and so those flooring surfaces have been there for a very long time. And so understanding how has this floor surface held up? When is it time to replace? When is it time to renovate? When we're adding on, when we're creating new spaces, what are the best types of floors to put in? All of those are very important. And again, all of our members are non-for-profit hospitals. So budget time comes around, you have to have a really good reason to ask for anything new, much less new floors.
Right.
So flooring is not always one of those things that is seen as a money maker, so to speak, but it sure can send money out the door.
Yeah, it sure could cost them a lot.
Right.
That innocent-looking floor. In today's presentation, what was your takeaway? I mean, what was your view of the 5 steps that I spoke about in preventing slips, trips, and falls? Anything jump out at you that was particularly more interesting or beneficial?
Well, I think you and I had this conversation that really prevention of slips, trips, falls is not sexy, but it is consistent. I mean, there are things that need to be done. They need to be done well, and consistently communicating between all parties. It takes a lot of effort, but of course that effort is worth it when you get to see that you're not having quite as many people out of work because they did not slip and fall. And that's a hard thing to prove, that negative of we impacted because we had fewer. But when you start looking at, we're doing rounds. These are the positive things we are doing. And it has impacted not only our employees, which is great, but it's also impacted everyone from the community that's coming to visit your organization. Right. So that it's safer for everyone in the community to come and visit you. That's what you're looking for. That's what you're going for. You
had mentioned during my presentation, I guess I struck a nerve with one of the attendees who's had you may want to tell the story about they had a personal experience with a family member who suffered from this type of an injury.
Right, we did. We had a person who is a member. She came to the presentation today. Her father had experienced a slip, trip, fall in a grocery store type environment, and unfortunately he passed away shortly thereafter. I think less than 6 months after that. It struck a nerve with her enough to where she did end up having to leave the presentation because she was distraught. So it just takes home the fact that I read this information kind of from a data aspect. I don't always see the individuals who've experienced the slip, trip, fall. So it brings home that, these are people. This is someone's mother, father, daughter, son, aunt, uncle. You can go on. And it impacts not just that person, but impacts the rest of their family.
Well, it sure does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Regardless of age.
Right.
And sadly, I do a lot of presentations like this throughout the country, and it's common for me when I ask the question, how many of you either been the victim of a slip and fall and faced a serious injury or know somebody? Mm-hmm. And as you saw today, Wendy, many people will raise their hands. I mean, the majority of people have personal experience, but what kind of is troubling is they don't really know what to do. In fact, we had another gentleman say, hey, if I test my floors and they come up as low traction, what do I do? Well, the goal is to do something. Mm-hmm. First of all, test your floors to know where they're at, and then take corrective measures. We also spoke about in my presentation some of the tools that we're we're creating at the National Floor Safety Institute, the app for cell phones for doing walkway audits, the digital audit format that's particularly of interest to millennials who prefer that method of training and doing their job responsibly. We also talked about the virtual audit,
right,
which I think you have an interest in maybe advancing the virtual audit. And then, the online information that NFSI provides to the insurance industry through its website for policies, procedures, training. We have a lot of snippets of videos, that sort of thing. And it sounds like those three would be of high interest to you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because I am a walkway auditor, I've seen a lot of the videos before and have shamelessly taken them and used them in some of our presentations to kind of help hit home the importance and the impact. Impactful videos are little snippets are very good to bring about awareness and also to make sure that your audience is paying attention.
Right.
Really engaged in the activity.
Well, again, you mentioned it's not a real sexy subject. Safety in general tends to not be a particularly fun subject to want to train or teach to. And you're right, I do use a lot of surveillance videos in the presentation to bring it home. Mm-hmm. But last question before I let you go. What was your biggest takeaway from today? What is it that after today's presentation, moving forward, you feel would be the most useful, beneficial, whether they're tools or resources or educational programs? What is it that you took away from today, and how would you see implementing that in the future?
Yeah. Well, today, I think maybe not most important, but the most interesting thing I took away is I want to make sure we're engaging people more. And so using some of the more updated tools, the tools that are actually driven more towards the younger generation, I think are going to be imperative as we go forward, because those are the people who are now out there working in our environments that we want to engage and get them involved enough to say, hey, this doesn't look right. Hey, I need help. Hey, I'm going to clean this up, fix this. That's where we need to get to. So I think that's probably the thing I'm taking away is how do we get to them? We can't do it with these same tools that we've used for 10 years or more. We don't walk around with paper audits anymore. We have to reach out and make it more interesting and more fun for them to tell us what's going on.
Well, that's one of the things NFSI is committed to is serving its membership, its the larger population, and having simple, easy to use, easy to access, low cost, or in many cases no cost tools to empower you and your members to really begin turning the tide on slips, trips, and falls. Is the first thing I said in the presentation today, as I usually do, is this isn't rocket science. Most of this is pretty simple stuff. Preventing these types of injuries is not really hard, but it can be complex based on the structure of the organization, the company, where there's many different arms. You've got risk management, claims, maintenance, housekeeping. We can go all the way through the litany of medical staff that all need to kind of be on the same page. Everybody's got to work together, and if they don't, you have those weak links, and that's usually where it falls through the cracks. That's when people get hurt, is the handoff from one department to another, and that kind of chronic failure can oftentimes really be a challenge moving forward. But thanks for today's interview. We've been speaking with Wendy Stephenson, Vice President of Risk Management at the Risk Authority, and look forward to working with you in the future.
You too, Russ. Thank you.